I knew the call was coming. The moment I saw Mom's name flashing on my phone, I sighed and let it ring. I had ignored the last 4 calls, and I wasn't about to break my streak. Instead, I let the phone vibrate on the smooth glass surface of my desk, watching as it rattled slightly before falling silent again. 3 seconds later, my laptop chimed with an email notification. Jonathan Whitmore. Subject: Your sister needs you. Last chance. I clicked on it, my pulse already speeding up before I even read the words. Madeline, your sister's wedding is in 2 weeks. She needs you. Your mother is at her wit's end, and your father has had enough of this childish avoidance. You have a duty to this family. Isabel's wedding is the most important event of her life. Be there, or forget about any future support. Jonathan. I clenched my jaw. My family had a way of making everything about duty and support, as if those words meant love. They didn't. I let out a short, bitter laugh. A second later, my phone vibrated again. A voicemail. I hesitated, then hit play, putting it on speaker. Madeline, it's your mother. Her voice filled my apartment, crisp and authoritative as always. I don't know what game you're playing, but this has gone on long enough. Your sister's wedding is in 2 weeks, and the festivities start this weekend. If you can't put aside whatever grievances you have for Isabel's special time, then you can forget about any future support from this family. The words grievances and special time made me scoff. Your father is beside himself with worry, she continued. Call me back immediately. I exhaled slowly as the message ended. My fingers hovered over my phone. Call back. Ignore it. Another text popped up from my mother. Please call. Your father is getting impatient. There it was. The real threat. Dad was a man of few words, but when he spoke it carried weight. Ignoring my mother was one thing, but ignoring my father? That was a whole different story. I pushed my chair back, crossing the apartment to my closet. Reaching into the back, behind thick winter coats I rarely wore, I pulled out a framed diploma. Madeline and Whitmore. Bachelor of Science in Data Science, summa cum laude. 3 years of hard work. 3 years of proving I could do it on my own. And yet, it was still hidden behind coats instead of hanging on my wall. Because no matter how far I ran, I still carried the weight of my family's expectations. I turned the frame over, pressing my fingers against the cool glass. I had built my own life, away from the control, the suffocating obligations. My job in New York City paid me well, and my savings account was proof that I didn't need anyone. But my family didn't know that. To them, I was still the wayward daughter who ran off to the big city, the one who needed to be reminded of her place. I glanced at my banking app. $146,139. More than enough. I took a deep breath and looked out my window at the gleaming skyline. Then, before I could think too hard about it, I grabbed my suitcase and started packing. The flight back to Charleston, South Carolina was smooth, but my mind wasn't. I stared out the small oval window as the city's twinkling lights came into view beneath the clouds. My fingers drummed against my jeans, my heartbeat steady but tight. It had been 3 years since I last stepped foot in my childhood home. 3 years since I walked away from my family's expectations. And now, I was heading right back into the lion's den. The plane touched down smoothly. As soon as I switched my phone off airplane mode, the messages flooded in. Mom, we'll send a driver. Jonathan, don't be late tomorrow. Isabel, try not to ruin this for me, Maddie. I sighed at Isabel's text. It wasn't surprising. She had always been the golden child, the perfect one. She didn't mean it as an insult. She just genuinely expected everything to revolve around her. I didn't respond to any of them. By the time I grabbed my suitcase from baggage claim, I spotted a familiar black car parked outside the terminal. A man in a crisp suit stepped out, holding the door open. Ms. Whitmore, welcome home. I slid into the back seat without a word. The city blurred past the window as we drove through Charleston's historic streets. The familiarity made my stomach twist. The grand mansions, the pristine gardens, the perfectly preserved charm of old money. My family's estate sat just outside the city, a massive white columned house, its long driveway lined with oaks draped in Spanish moss. It looked the same as ever, untouched by time, untouched by anything at all. As the car pulled up, the front doors opened. My mother stood there, elegant as always, her pearl necklace resting perfectly on her collarbone. Beside her, my father's imposing figure loomed. Even in the dim lighting, his sharp blue eyes locked onto mine. The car door opened and I stepped out. "Showtime, Madeline," my mother said smoothly, stepping forward. I expected a hug, but instead, she kissed the air beside my cheek. A polite, practiced motion rather than anything warm. "Mother," I replied, my voice just as even. My father simply nodded. Inside. "It's late," he said, turning on his heel. The Whitmore family, where emotions were measured and affection was doled out like a business transaction. I followed them inside, past the grand foyer, past the gleaming chandeliers, past the walls lined with expensive artwork. "Your room has been prepared," my mother said, gesturing toward the grand staircase. "Get some rest. Tomorrow is an important day." I knew better than to argue. I climbed the stairs, pulling my suitcase behind me. The hallway smelled the same, like polished wood and expensive perfume. My childhood bedroom was untouched. The four-poster bed, the antique dresser, the perfectly arranged bookshelves. But as I shut the door behind me, it felt like a stranger in my own past. I set my suitcase down and exhaled. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains, casting soft golden hues across the room. I stretched under the heavy duvet, momentarily disoriented before reality settled in. I was home. I sighed, sitting up and running a hand through my hair. The house was eerily quiet, but I knew that wouldn't last. The Whitmore estate was always like this, still calculated, like a perfectly staged play where every actor knew their role. Mine was the misfit. After a quick shower, I dressed in something simple but appropriate. A beige dress that I knew would meet my mother's approval. Nothing too bold, nothing too casual. Just enough to avoid a lecture. When I stepped into the hallway, the scent of freshly brewed coffee and expensive cologne told me that breakfast was already underway. Game face on, Madeline. I made my way downstairs to the grand dining room, where my parents and siblings sat at the long mahogany table. A spread of fruit, eggs, pastries, and fresh juice was laid out meticulously. My father sat at the head of the table, reading the morning paper, his silver-rimmed glasses perched low on his nose. My mother sipped from a delicate porcelain teacup, her back straight as ever. Jonathan, my older brother, was dressed in a sharp suit, scrolling through his phone, probably handling some important business deal. And then there was Isabel, glowing, poised, the perfect image of a bride-to-be. "Good morning," I said, slipping into my seat. "You're late," Jonathan muttered without looking up. "By 5 minutes," I replied, taking a sip of coffee. "5 minutes is still late," my father said, turning a page of his newspaper. His tone was neutral, but the message was clear. I bit back a sigh. "Same old Whitmore household." "You slept well?" my mother asked, though it felt more like a formality than actual concern. "Fine," I said, taking a bite of toast. Isabel set down her fork delicately. "We need to talk about today," she said, her voice calm but expectant. "Oh, are we going to discuss how I was forced to come back?" I quipped, raising an eyebrow. Isabel shot me a warning look. "Madeline, this is important," she said. "I need you to behave." I rolled my eyes. "When have I ever not behaved?" Jonathan snorted. "Do you really want us to answer that?" I ignored him, focusing back on my sister. "Look, Isabel, I know this is your big day, and I'm here, aren't I?" I said. "So let's not act like I'm going to ruin it." She exhaled, as if physically restraining herself from saying something sharper. "I just don't want any unnecessary drama," she said, smoothing out an invisible crease in her dress. "Mother and father have already worked so hard to make this engagement party perfect." "Perfect," I echoed, stirring my coffee. "Right. Because that's what this family does best, isn't it?" The room fell into silence. My mother cleared her throat. "You'll wear the dress we sent to your room," she said, redirecting the conversation. "It's elegant. Suitable. Of course. Because in this house appearance was everything." "Fine," I muttered, setting my cup down. I could play along. For one night. But something told me that this family gathering would be far from perfect. And I had a sinking feeling, that I wasn't the only one hiding something. The engagement party was set to begin in a few hours, and the Whitmore estate was already buzzing with activity. Staff members moved with precision, arranging floral displays, setting up the outdoor dining area, and ensuring that everything looked flawless. I stood by my bedroom window, watching the scene unfold below. A perfect engagement party for the perfect couple, I muttered to myself. A knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. "Come in," I called. The door opened, and Isabel stepped inside. She was already dressed in a soft champagne-colored gown that hugged her figure elegantly. Her blonde hair was styled in waves, and her makeup was impeccable. "You're not dressed yet," she observed, eyeing the silk gown draped over the chair. "I'll get to it," I replied, crossing my arms. Isabel sighed and closed the door behind her. "Maddie, I know you don't want to be here," she said, her tone softer than before. "But I need you to understand how important this is. Not just for me, but for the family." "Of course," I said dryly. "Because what would the Whitmores be without their perfect image?" Her expression tightened. "This isn't just about appearances," she said. "It's about securing our future. Marrying into the Devereaux family means strengthening our legacy." I frowned. "Is that how you see it?" I asked. "Like some kind of business merger?" Isabel hesitated, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "It's more complicated than that," she admitted. I studied her. "Do you even love him?" I asked. She inhaled sharply, looking away. That was all the answer I needed. "Isabel," I started, but she shook her head. "It doesn't matter," she said. "This is the life we were raised for. Love is a luxury, not a necessity." I clenched my jaw. "That's not true," I said. "You don't have to go through with this if it's not what you want." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "It's done, Maddie," she said firmly. "Tonight, I'm announcing my engagement to William Devereaux. No second thoughts. No doubts." I could see it then, the weight she carried. The expectations, the pressure, the duty she felt toward our family. I wanted to argue, to tell her she had a choice. But deep down, I knew Isabel had already made hers. She turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Please," she said quietly, "just be there for me tonight." And then she was gone. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the gown in front of me. Something didn't feel right. I wasn't sure if it was Isabel's forced engagement, the unsettling atmosphere in the house, or the nagging feeling that secrets were about to unravel. But I knew one thing for certain. This night would be anything but perfect. The sun had set over the Whitmore estate, casting a golden glow over the gardens where the engagement party was about to begin. Guests in designer gowns and tailored suits arrived in luxury cars, stepping out onto the grand estate grounds with elegance. Laughter and polite conversation filled the air as servers moved between them, offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I stood at the top of the grand staircase, fully dressed in the gown Isabel had chosen for me, a soft emerald green that shimmered under the chandelier lights. My hair was styled in loose waves, and I had allowed the stylist to apply just enough makeup to meet the family's high standards. But despite my polished appearance, I felt anything but put together. I spotted Isabel at the center of the garden, standing beside William Devereaux. He was dressed in an expensive navy blue suit, his posture confident as he greeted guests. Isabel's expression was unreadable, poised yet distant, like she was wearing a mask she couldn't take off. I sighed, gripping the staircase railing. "This night is going to be a disaster," I muttered. "That makes two of us," a voice said beside me. I turned sharply to find Julian standing there, dressed in a crisp black suit, his silver cufflinks catching the light. He looked effortless, as if he belonged in this world of wealth and power. But the slight smirk on his lips told me otherwise. "Didn't expect to see you here," I said, eyeing him. "And miss an evening of Whitmore family drama?" he teased. "Not a chance." I rolled my eyes but couldn't help the small smile tugging at my lips. "Come on," he said, offering his arm. "Let's get this over with." I hesitated for a moment before looping my arm through his. Together, we descended the stairs, stepping into the heart of the celebration. The evening unfolded in a blur of polite conversation and carefully curated perfection. Guests gushed over Isabel and William's supposed perfect match, while my parents mingled with influential figures, ensuring the Whitmore name remained untouchable. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. I caught glimpses of Isabel stealing anxious glances at William, her hands clenched at her sides whenever he placed a possessive hand on her waist. Meanwhile, William himself exuded an unsettling confidence, like a man who knew he had already won the game. "You notice it too, don't you?" Julian whispered beside me. "Notice what?" I asked. "That something isn't right with Devereaux." I turned to face him. "What do you mean?" He took a slow sip of his drink before responding. "I did some digging," he said. "William's family is powerful, but their wealth didn't come from just business deals. There are whispers about dealings that aren't exactly legal." I stiffened. "Illegal? What kind of dealings?" Julian's expression darkened. "Let's just say there's a reason people don't cross the Devereaux family." A chill ran down my spine. Before I could respond, the sound of a glass being tapped silenced the crowd. Isabel stood at the center of the gathering, William by her side. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady despite the tension in her shoulders. "Thank you for being here tonight to celebrate this special occasion. It means the world to me and my family." The crowd erupted in applause, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. And then it did. A loud voice suddenly cut through the celebration. "You're making a mistake, Isabel." Gasps filled the air as a man stepped forward from the crowd. A man I didn't recognize. His sharp blue eyes locked onto Isabel with an urgency that sent a ripple of unease through the guests. William's expression darkened instantly, his jaw tightening. "Who the hell is this?" he demanded. But Isabel had gone completely pale. And for the first time all evening, I saw real fear in her eyes. The perfect engagement party had just turned into a nightmare. A heavy silence settled over the garden, the murmurs of guests fading into hushed whispers. Isabel stood frozen, her hands trembling slightly as she stared at the man who had just interrupted her engagement celebration. William, on the other hand, was furious. His eyes burned with quiet rage as he took a step toward the stranger. "Who are you?" he demanded. The man straightened his posture, his expression firm. He was in his late 30s, dressed in a tailored gray suit, but there was something rugged about him, like he didn't quite belong among these polished elites. "My name is Ethan Calloway," he said, his voice carrying through the crowd. "And I came here because Isabel needs to know the truth before it's too late." The tension in the air thickened. My parents exchanged worried glances, while the guests leaned in, eager for whatever scandal was about to unfold. "I don't know who you are," William said coldly, "but you have no place here. This is a private event." Ethan ignored him, keeping his eyes on Isabel. "Tell them, Isabel," he urged. "Tell them why you're afraid to marry him." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My heart pounded. "Isabel?" I asked, stepping closer to her. She looked at me then, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before. Desperation. William's grip on her tightened. "Enough," he hissed. "You're embarrassing yourself, Calloway. Leave before I have you thrown out." But Ethan wasn't backing down. "If you force her to go through with this engagement, you'll regret it," he warned. "And so will everyone in this room." His words sent a chill through me. Julian stepped beside me, lowering his voice. "We need to get Isabel away from him," he murmured. "Away from who?" I whispered back. "Ethan or William?" Julian didn't answer, but I already knew. Isabel was shaking now, her nails digging into her palm. She started, her voice barely above a whisper. William turned to her, his grip tightening even more. "You don't have to explain anything," he said smoothly, forcing a smile. "This man is lying. He's just here to stir up trouble." Ethan took a step forward. "Is that so?" he challenged. "Then why don't we talk about what happened in Paris last year?" The color drained from William's face. The crowd erupted in whispers again. Paris? What had happened in Paris? I looked at Isabel, searching her face for answers. But she wasn't looking at me anymore. She was staring at William, and she was terrified.